Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Capacity for MSP final event. My name is Ivana Lukic. I work for SUBMARINER Network for Blue Growth in Berlin, Germany, and I will be your moderator for today. Well, we have a very packed, very ambitious agenda for today with 3 exciting sessions, as you can actually see now from your screen. Now, before proceeding further, I would like to address something. Well, many of us have been affected by what is happening currently in Ukraine for the last 2 weeks. Many of you have relatives in Ukraine, and many of you are hosting asylum seekers in your homes now. Well, thank you for still showing up today at your work, and thank you for joining us at this event. And most of all, our hearts go to all those directly affected by the situation and those who have lost their loved ones. You may have seen that the presentation of the Russian roadmap, MSP roadmap, has been excluded from the agenda. Well, this was deemed as the best decision for the moment. Now, we will proceed with the event, and we will try to keep the positive outlook as much as possible. As I said, we have 3 exciting sessions for today, looking at different outputs coming out from the project Capacity for MSP, discussing what are kind of the future steps, and in general, what are the future steps for the intensified dialogue in the Baltic Sea for further collaboration, and so on. So now, without further ado, I would like to explain to you that actually our Slido, we will be using Slido for the interaction with you for today. So just so you know, you will be able for the first session to put your questions via Slido. And the hashtag for using Slido will actually be Capacity4MSP. So capacity with a number 4 in between, MSP. And the link for Slido is simply slido.com. So quite easy, slido.com. For the first session, you're able to actually send your questions through Slido. And later on, for the sessions going on, we will have some pools for you as well. So this is basically our main method for the interaction with the audience. So any questions you have coming through for our first couple of presentations, please do send them via Slido. And again, you can join Slido by typing slido.com in your browsers and then using the hashtag Capacity4MSP. Easy. Okay, excellent. So now I would like to invite Inga Jakobsson from the VASAB Secretariat as the lead of the project to give us an overview of the Capacity for MSP results. Inga, the floor is yours.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Ivana, for giving me the floor for this very exciting event, the final event of the project Platform Capacity for MSP. So my name is Inga Jakobsson. I work for the VASAB Secretariat, and I am project manager of this platform. So in this introduction, I'd like you that you will go with me through the journey of how this project was implemented, and maybe let's start with from the beginning. So, just a second. Yeah, so how it all started. So it was back in 2019. We had a very nice event in Riga. It was a 3rd Baltic MSP Forum, and it was kind of official handover from Pan-Baltic scope when one project ended and another started, and this was like a final start of this project platform. However, it was only official handover. There was also a non-official handover from the Pan-Baltic Scope project, and it happened back in December of 2019 in Gothenburg. it was very, very nice official, non-official event. And actually even so non-official that it was called in our circles like hangover event. So very nice event, a lot of nice memories, I guess, for all of us. And yeah, actually it was at least my last business trip, and that's why it is in a very warm place of my heart. So we started our work back in 2019, like usually we do. Like usually it starts with the project. It went very well and very traditionally. But then something happened. You know what happened? It's COVID-19 pandemic situation, and quite soon we were forced to went digital. So all activities were transferred and adapted to distance mode. Not only meetings, but of course all the activities as well. So we worked very hard alone. It was very unusual for all the MSP family because I guess there was no months when we hadn't meet each other, but now that was a new reality when we were forced to work from our home offices with our new colleagues, like you see in the screen, our pets. And but this didn't stop us to achieve our result and actually even exceed our expectations. So I think we got used to all the difficulties that we were facing during this period, and we tried to find the best possible way how we can implement what we have promised, as well as keeping the spirit and morale in the partnership. For example, here on the screen you have some snapshot from the fourth Baltic MSP Forum that took place in June last year. And actually, I think it was really a success story for how the event could be organized in a distance mode, but at the same time achieve all possible aims and even exceed our expectations. So we became really digital through these 2 years, but nevertheless, we worked very, very jointly together. The spirit was there, and actually we even get a lot of fun from working with each other in a distance mode. And nevertheless, the progress was there, and we achieved it even more than we promised and than we expected at the beginning of the project. So to be serious, what actually we have achieved. So here in the slide, you see the summary of what we have done during this project. So one of the direction was regarding to intensification of the dialogue. So nevertheless, online or in person, we have managed to organize many events, many meaningful events where we increased our knowledge, and we shared our best practices through different workshops, as well as planning forum that was organized on a regular basis during this event. And also we have managed to produce some very meaningful outputs to increase the knowledge of overall MSP knowledge. And you will learn more about this result a little bit later. So there will be a very busy agenda, and I encourage you to listen very carefully what the project leaders have accomplished and ask them questions using Slido option. So what you see on the screen will be detailed, discussed within our event. And yes, and I hope you will learn more. And through this event, we also achieve the main objectives of our project: increase knowledge and intensify dialogue over MSP and over the Baltic Sea region. So To sum up, I'd like to say that, yes, these were quite difficult times, and it doesn't matter all the difficulties, whether we have worked in person or online. I think this project platform proves that MSP community is not just a bunch of group of people working for the same purpose for coherent maritime spatial planning, but it's really a family. And with this message, I'd like you to keep it, that we are MSP family and we can overcome difficulties that also could come. And I think you understand about what I'm speaking, and cooperation, I think, is the key element here. So thank you very much for your attention. As I said, we have very busy and interesting agenda that will come. And I would like to give the back floor to Ivana to continue this great event. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Inga, very much. Thanks for this excellent overview indeed. So let's try now to dive a bit more into these specific outputs, as you said, outputs of the Capacity4MSP project. So now the first session of today is called Increased Knowledge in MSP. So let's have a look what were the specific outputs coming out from the Capacity4MSP project. I have a pleasure to introduce Jacek Zaucha from Maritime Institute of Maritime University in Gdynia. Jacek, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ivana. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
I must say that I disagree with Inga that, you know, being online or personal, it's the same. For me, it was not the same. But of course, we coped with the problem. So I would like to tell you about the knowledge we have accumulated during this project, because it was a kind of a project which should support real MSP processes. And we made a screening of a lot of sources of information, mainly project, but also EU MSP platform, which was established by Angela and her SPRO. And we presented the outcomes in two documents. One is a big document report, and here you can see the policy brief, which are available from the VASAB website, when there are key policy messages, the same as in this big report. You can see those different projects we have screened. There was a lot of them, and each project, because we wanted to see where are the gaps, where are the problems, where are the issues which still are not covered. So each review ended with a kind of key observation for policies. And then out of those key observations, we tried to come up with tasks that need to be advanced and gaps in relation to the common understanding what should be better discussed or should be better put on the table or operationalized. But you know, the main method was we started with those reviews of the project, but then the main method for coming up with those tasks, with those gaps, it was work with the stakeholders. And we use very different fora for asking stakeholders what is important for you. And here you have a top selection of because we have a lot of tasks, many of them. So here you have top priority tasks, which we realize that perhaps should be advanced in the future. So this is about socio-economic consequences of MSP, but also about social sustainability in MSP, which means which group they are benefiting, which group, you know, that the cost, they take the burden of MSP. So this is a very important question, which has not been discussed so much, with some exception, of course. Then monitoring, we think that now it's a time of monitoring how MSP is working, what are the problems. Of course, climate change and carrying capacity of environment, I would say key top challenges, which I would say they were very, very highlighted during the work of the project. And then sparing use of the sea, so support for multi-use of energy sites. That's important because those multi-use of energy sites, they change entirely the picture. So if you put windmill farms, and it will be for 25 years, so we think that we should use the sea sparingly, and this multi-use is a key issue. So this was not decision of the expert, it was decision by the stakeholders, different authorities working with MSP. And on those basis, we came up with some also policy advice to the Interact programs, what tools, what type of technology toolboxes, whatever is necessary for the future. And here it's of course related to the top priorities. So socio-economic consequences, I must here tell that there was only one attempt done by ESPRO so far with, looking on that. But still we don't see how those trade-offs between different uses in economic terms can be used. And there is a problem of data. Eurostat is not discriminated between marine and non-marine data. And then tools for enhancing social sustainability. The social sustainability is totally new. We have started discussion only now. So how to incorporate those social issues, which are so important. Now we can see in this work after 24th of February that social issues are a key. Perhaps it's also for MSP, but it was a little bit hidden. Also tools for analyzing MSP adaptation to the climate change. So what we can do, how we can assess it. There was a lot of different tools developed, like Symphony, Baltic Sea Impact Tool, and some others. But here it was more about, fine-tuning those tools and looking about their synergies, how to develop them. And then tools for multi-use of energy sites. So here we are thinking about the testing of the existing tools. And here the biggest problem is in terms of social aspect once more, so engagement, how to bring together different parties and to tell them, okay, we have synergies from multi-use. This is really important. So this facilitation of this debate and discussion, communicating of those benefits, societal benefits, that such tools would be helpful. And that's it. So I think this is a very short review of what we have achieved. I would say it was a fascinating journey, as was said by Inga, but of course now I hope we'll have time to think about this in the new circumstances, the Baltic Europe. Perhaps not all those findings are relevant. Perhaps some other issues should be more highlighted. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, Jacek. This was very concise and excellent overview. Thanks very much for that. So as the next speaker, we have Angela Schulze. And Angela, you have conducted kind of a review, went over the MSPs that have been actually now adopted in Baltic Sea countries. So I very much look forward to your presentations. Without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ivana. And let's hope that my screen sharing is working. Hold on. So I hope that you can all see my screen now and my slides. So what I have indeed focused on is to look at what does it mean if countries have MSPs adopted. And hold on, I just have to. Okay, so the outline of my presentation is that I first will sort of give an introduction and then sort of look at what is actually in the maritime spatial plans, and then, and then, how these maritime spatial plans are monitored and evaluated, and in terms of future developments, in addition to Jacek's works, as well as the MSP roadmap, what are areas for future development which have sort of derived out of the analysis of our report. So just let's look at how the situation was in the Baltic Sea in 2011. Here you see that, in the Project Baltic plan, it was very much about just patches of MSPs. And in fact, all of them, with the exception of the ones from Germany, were actually pilot developments testing on how MSP could work in the countries. Then at the beginning of the adoption of the MSP directive, which was, of course, a landmark for maritime spatial planning in Europe, here you can see that still also in the Baltic Sea, countries were in progress, but actually not so many MSPs were adopted. So this situation has really changed now. So starting from Germany, going to Lithuania, then, going to Latvia, Poland and Finland, and now actually also Sweden this year has adopted maritime spatial plans. So the picture in 2022 is really a completely different one. So, but in fact, not only that these MSPs look quite different, what we have to acknowledge, sorry, I have to go through this, that so far there is not so much known what does this mean? What does it mean that countries have maritime spatial plans? So far, most of the projects, studies, articles, methods have concentrated very much on how MSPs are prepared. But there is hardly any information on their actual implementation. And this is what we have changed with this report. So if this is just a short introduction, if you want to learn more, you're very much welcome to visit the Capacity4MSP website hosted by VASAB, and you can download the full report on implementation, which has actually also been reviewed by all the MSP authorities in the Baltic Sea. So I hope that in terms of the state of play, that it gives you a true picture of the situation by November 2022. We always have to give this date because developments are fast moving. So what you will see in this report, which at a certain stage we had to sort of finalize, was that, for instance, the MSP in Sweden was still not yet passed the government, but now this situation, for instance, has already changed. So that we do have MSPs adopted in almost all EU member states of the Baltic Sea. And in fact, this report is also the first contribution to the MSP roadmap, which was also prepared in the framework of the Capacity4MSP project, which is really guiding the MSP process until 2030. And what was seen here as one of the very first actions necessary in the coming years is to follow up on the implementation and to actually have also a guiding framework to support the harmonized evaluation of MSPs. So including, for instance, a set of definitions, as well as to find sort of a good way of how we can account for the implementation of MSP. And this report is, of course, meant to be already sort of a guiding framework on how countries may sort of report consistently about their implementation. So let's dive into the MSPs. So which uses have actually been taken into account in the MSPs in the Baltic Sea region? Here you see, what is actually written in Article 8.2 of the EU MSP Directive in terms of what kind of uses were expected to be taken into account. And what is quite interesting to see here is that despite sort of these uses mentioned in the article, that not all countries have actually allocated uses to all the sectors indicated there. What all countries have done is that they were showing the shipping routes, that they have sort of showed development areas for offshore wind development, as well as showing the cables and pipelines. And what you can see as well is, however, that in terms of the other uses mentioned in the MSP directive, that not all countries have actually allocated uses to them. The reasons may be different, that in some countries these uses are actually not so important, as well as also other differences that the MSP authority may have not been really in charge. What is also important to consider is that, I know it's not so easy to read, is that if you see a small x, it means that this use is considered or has been considered as part of the MSP, but that in fact it has not sort of been shown as a specific positive zone for development. And what is interesting is, however, that at the same time, despite this long list of uses mentioned in the MSP directive already, that many countries have actually allocated zones also for uses which have been not mentioned. And you can sort of see here for yourself what these kind of uses are. So we see, for instance, that some countries have allocated uses to land reclamation or to the maritime industry or specific coordination areas, as well as, for instance, specific space reserved for future use. And I think what should be mentioned also is that Finland has even shown in its MSP connections. And I think this is an interesting picture that, after all, it's, in MSPs, it's not only about specific zones, but it's also to show coherence and linear connections between these different uses. And this country has actually really explicitly gone as far as showing them in their MSP. So what does it actually mean in terms of designating these uses? Again, this is not so easy to see in the various MSPs now adopted. So when it comes to MPAs or shipping routes, actually the countries have, of course, mainly shown zones for existing users, so where there are already MPAs and where there are the main shipping routes which have to be sort of, allocated priority zones. But when we sort of, come to offshore wind development, it's a quite different pictures. Here, the zones are sometimes, meant to show existing offshore wind farms, in some cases licensed ones, in some cases it's referring to suitable areas or investigation areas. In some cases, offshore wind development is only possible in these mapped zones, but in other countries this is not true. It's also possible in other areas. So one has to always understand that not everything is immediately visible in the plans if you just look at the map. Then the second question is, what kind of zones are actually sort of possible? What kind of zones are shown? What is important to note is that, of course, all the MSPs we have now adopted in the Baltic Sea have always two documents. One is the plan, it's sort of the map, and here mainly the zones shown are the positive ones, so the ones where use is possible. However, in most cases, these zones are then also sort of coming with some kind of considerations, with some explanations. And here it's very often that we also find negative designations, meaning what is not allowed in these zones. What should also be understood is, in terms of the uses I have shown earlier on, that not all sectors have areas where they are granted priority status. And I come to this later on. And in almost all countries, actually, no, in all countries, not almost all countries, fishery and shipping is in fact permitted everywhere, unless specifically noted in a zone. And what I have shown, in view of Finland, which has shown connections, what is also to be noted is that in the case of Germany, for instance, some of the zoning has a temporal character. So it has restrictions where either, this zone is only, until a given area, until a given year, sort of allocated to a use, or that actually it's a priority area at a specific season of the time. So in fact, most countries are working with priority areas, and almost all countries have priority areas allocated for shipping routes, offshore wind, and nature protection, meaning that in these zones, these uses have top priority, and only other uses are allowed if they do not impede on that priority use. And in fact, in Poland, we see that, which has sort of allocated its entire region into 95 sub-areas. And here it has gone a specific route that, in fact, in all these 95 sub-areas, there's one priority use. And then, in fact, there are sort of, other uses which are allowed. And this is sort of shown for each of these 95 sub-areas. And here you can read for yourself again that, for some sectors, Poland has assigned priority areas, but that there are also other sectors which are only subsequently allowed also in these areas. But going back to definitions, and this is one of the objectives shown also in the MSP roadmap, is that we have to be aware that even if, we have the same wording in different countries, so we have, for instance, in some countries, a zone which is called general use zone, that it can mean different things. In Latvia and Poland, a general use zone means that any use is allowed in this zone which does not impede on nature. However, in Denmark, a general use zone means something completely different, because these zones are not open for uses for which specific development zones are already established. And here you can see these kind of development zones. Then moving into the implementation of MSP, what are actually the responsibilities for, because it was clear with regards to the MSP authorities that they are in charge of preparing the MSPs. But as we all know, the planning, the actual implementation of the MSPs is then very often moving towards other ministries, towards other authorities who are in charge of that given sectors. Generally, what we can say is where in the countries where MSPs are legally binding, and these are all the countries in the Baltic Sea region with the exception of Finland and Sweden, where we are sort of having MSPs as guiding documents, that the MSP authority is involved or has to be involved by other ministries in subsequent licensing procedures. But then also countries move differently in terms of how they go on whether there is a coordinating group for MSP also with regards to implementation. So in Germany and in Finland, there is an MSP group, really a group among those who are in charge of MSP, but these are sort of more informal and they are focusing on really the maritime spatial planning. In countries like Latvia, Estonia, and Denmark, there is actually also for the implementation then an intersectoral MSP group established. And in Sweden, we actually have a group where the regions plus also some of the sectoral organizations are sort of represented. So going back to, the MSP in Finland and Sweden, in fact, also these guiding documents have a strong sort of, a strong meaning, but formally speaking, the decisions are taken by other institutions. So in the case of Finland, for instance, within the lower level land use plans. So the MSP authority has, formally speaking, not the decision-making power, but it's of course involved in the process. And then we talk about, to what extent are these MSPs, which are now adopted, are they adaptable in the coming years until a new maritime spatial plan is sort of adopted? Generally speaking, one has to say that a lot of the MSPs in the countries offer what I call leeway, because if you look into sort of the details of the allocations, we see that in some countries, again, as I have mentioned, it does not mean that if a use has been allocated a specific zone, that, it could not also be actually, if, there is pressure, also be implemented in another zone. So formally speaking, adaptation is possible in Germany, Denmark, Finland, and Latvia. Mainly, this is applicable for what has been planned, of course. But one has to say that all countries have responded that in terms of this adaptability, that, the process of really formally changing the MSP is almost in all countries pretty much similar to as if a new MSP would need to be adopted. But it is possible, but it has to go very often through the government. So let's look now into the monitoring and the evaluation. So here you see sort of the overview when the current sets of MSPs have been adopted and when the countries are expecting to have a revision of their MSP. So in Germany, this will already be in 2026. In other countries, it's sort of, seen as latest in 2030. Some do not really have a very specific timeline, but others are also expecting sort of a revision, perhaps a little bit earlier, and I come to this later, in order to align the MSP cycle with actually the MSFD reporting. So what does this, however, mean in terms of the framework for the monitoring and evaluation? And I will now not read out everything which is in the table here. You may sort of read it for yourself. But at the time when we were doing the report on how MSPs are implemented, in fact, one has to state that quite a number of countries and MSP authorities were responding that they had not sort of yet developed their formal monitoring and evaluation framework, and that in some instances that there is actually also not no formal monitoring and evaluation framework expected. So here, quite a lot of work still needs to be done. And this brings me actually to the future development areas, where I would like to stress that these are in addition to what is mentioned in the MSP roadmap and what has been done by Jacek in terms of looking into sort of results of projects. So first of all, let's look into sort of the digital plans. Many of the countries have sort of translated their MSPs nowadays really into also digital tools, but Denmark and Finland have gone even a step further, that their MSPs are, digital, and that the digital plan is actually the MSP. And here you see the example of Denmark. So if we look into these plans, so in view of sort of future development, at least it was not very clear how these digital plans will actually evolve over the coming years. So will they actually show these digital plans, Or will there be another digital plan which will then actually show the actual developments over the course of the next years when users are really installed in some of these development areas? So some work to be done. Then, as I have shown, in terms of the monitoring and evaluation frameworks, again, sort of, I would say rather unclear. And of course, it should also include cross-checks on lower level plans, because which are still in some cases to come. And it's so far only a few countries have also, formally speaking, installed scientific advisory councils, which may also sort of then guide the monitoring and evaluation. And then last but not least, in terms of linking the MSP and the MSFD cycles and reporting processes, here there is still a lot of work to be done, because so far these MSPs were the first generation, and given the call by the directive to have MSPs ready by 2021, this was outside the MSFD cycle. So now if we think about a reiterative process, there is sort of, the chance in the future MSPs to come to actually better align the MSP and MFSD cycles. And, currently this is difficult to cross-check. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention and apologize for sort of the moving around of this PowerPoint. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela, very much. This was very good overview. Excellent. Before proceeding to introduce our next speaker for today, I would like to remind everyone about Slido. So please send through your questions via Slido. We have some questions already coming through, which is excellent. And all the speakers that we had already. So Jacek, Angela, please stay with us, because once we hear the next speaker, we will have a bit of a Q&A with you, so you can answer the questions coming through Slido. You can actually already have a look at these questions so that you get a bit prepared. All right. Our next speaker is Liene Gaujeniete from VASAB again. She will present us the BASEMAPS. Liene, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ivana. Hello, everyone. I'm here today on behalf of HELCOM, and I'll try to share with you very shortly on the work that HELCOM has been doing in this activity regarding the improvements for the BASEMAPS. So as I see some new faces among the participants, I will start with one of the outcomes of this project, which is an animated video about BASEMAP. So let's see it, and then I'll tell you a bit more. Yeah, so maybe to add a bit, the Basemap service contains two sections. One is for the MSP input data, which is which provides the relevant data used in the national plans. And then the second section is for the output data that provides a harmonized overview of developed MSPs according to the guidelines on transboundary MSP output data structure in the Baltic Sea. BASEMAPS was developed by HELCOM in cooperation with national experts from the Baltic Sea region Maritime Spatial Planning Data Expert Subgroup. That is a subgroup of the HELCOM VASAB MSP working group. And it has been also supported by former projects like the Baltic Lines in the Interreg Baltic Sea region program and the Pan-Baltic scope funded by EASME. And BASEMAPS is mainly aimed at planners, data providers, and authorities dealing with MSP in the Baltic Sea, but it can also provide information to other MSP stakeholders. In the capacity for MSP, the activity addressing BASEMAPS had three main aims. And the first one was to develop a user guide and visualization. Secondly, it aimed at promotion of the BASEMAPS platform. And thirdly, it aims to increase the data and metadata available in BASEMAPS for MSP practitioners and stakeholders. So as part of this activity, two user guides were published online. And the first one is user guidelines that contain explanations of the BASEMAP structure. It explains the input and output data sections. And the second user guide is more technical. It's aimed at the admins or the persons who upload data on BASEMAPS, and this shows you insight on how to use it. The second activity that was carried out was the promotion of BASEMAPS, and you already saw the video that was created within this project, but also there were other types of promotional activities that were carried out, and it was mainly by participating in various events. I would like to emphasize one interaction in particular. The work was presented and promoted in the EU MSP Technical Expert Group on Data. It is a pan-European technical group with two aims. So first, to have more robust and common standards in terms of MSP-related data collection, and secondly, to support delivery of harmonized and interoperable national plans. And the active involvement of HELCOM in this pan-European data group has resulted in HELCOM VASAB BASEMAPS model to be one of the three recommended ready-to-use data models that are proposed by this group. And I think this is quite a good achievement. Lastly, to increase the data availability on BASEMAPS, the help desk sessions to support the data holders and providers were organized, and these aimed to practically support them and show them how to add input data and new services to BASEMAPS. Furthermore, Capacity4MSP has allowed to further restructure the input data section, which is carried out right now. And this should support the data holders to add data on BASEMAPS, and also for the viewers of it to make it more user-friendly. And lastly, I would like to add that the work within the Baltic Sea region data expert group is continuous, and this project has supported it in many ways. And for example, an analysis of Inspire and BASEMAPS compatibility was carried out, and discussions have been held on how to increase the availability of input data in BASEMAPS, among many others. And this is shortly it. Thank you for your attention now.
Thank you, Liene, very much. Excellent. All right, I would like to invite you to stay on the floor, our virtual floor, and I would like to also invite Angela and Jacek to come back. We have a couple of questions sent through via Slido, and I would like to read out these for you. So Angela, actually you have presented a number of different uses and how these are being considered in MSPs. So we have actually two questions for you. One is relating to multi-use. So how is multi-use considered in the plans across the Baltic? And the other question refers to the climate change. So maybe from your overview, what would be your take on these two topics? How were these kind of considered in MSP, and what is kind of your overall take on that?
Yeah, I take the first question, and I think I can sort of, immediately then also give it further to Jacek, because I don't have now the table in front of me, but I remember that Poland was the country which has sort of explicitly allocated zones for multi-use, but this does not mean that other countries have not done so, because as I have presented, all countries do have priority zones or zones for specific use, but at the same time, very often also show and enable that other uses are also allowed in these zones under certain conditions. So I would say that if a zone in Poland is specifically sort of earmarked as multi-use, that this is then more referring to let's call development areas, research areas where, a specific focus is placed on that. Jacek, do you want to come back to that? Or, show more details?
Okay, at least in the Polish context. So what we did, we promoted multi-use mainly with regard to concrete structures. So if there are some concrete structures allowed, it's the priority function is related, for example, to windmills, but also to some others. So we tried, because this is an area which is, taken for many years. So therefore, and for example, it's very difficult to fish there. It's very difficult to sail. So therefore, we try to put, for example, also aquaculture. For example, the aquaculture for environmental protection there. But this was consciously done. And one of the aim of Polish MSP is to plan sparingly, which is also, in terms of axiology, is, giving support to multi-use. But multi-use is in the plan, definitely.
Yeah, perhaps also to take it from the other side, for instance, in the German case, it is quite interesting because it's even sort of almost taken from the other side. So in view of aquaculture in the EEZ, it is only possible within the framework of infrastructures. So it is not in the conditions of the offshore wind infrastructures. It's noted there, but it is noted, in terms of possible space for aquaculture, that this is promoted, in terms of being within these areas. So one really has to read the text in terms of understanding where is it possible, but where is it also actively promoted in that sense. In terms of the question related to climate change, I would like to note that we have not analyzed now how the MSPs have been designed, with what kind of conditions, etc. Here, I would actually also like to refer to a parallel report which has been recently released by the WWF, which is sort of, more looking into that perspective, to what extent, what has been taken into account, etc., in view of the MSPs adopted. But I mean, in terms of understanding, in terms of actions to mitigate climate change, of course, we can see that all countries are allocating renewable energy space for renewable energy. Many countries have not sort of allocated it yet, but they have sort of, foreseen space for low trophic aquaculture. And here in particular, I would also highlight the Maritime Spatial Plan from Denmark, which has, really sort of many of the additional tasks we have seen, CO2 storage, etc. So here you can actually sort of already, most specifically see that climate change has been sort of a factor coming in the design of the MSP.
Excellent. Thanks, Angela, very much. So we see that countries go about climate change in different ways, but also about multi-use. So they're considering it in different ways, and that shows up in various manner in the plans itself. So Jacek, I see that also in the Polish MSP there is so-called future zones, so zone for the future uses. I think that's very interesting for kind of future generations. So it's good to kind of set aside also some space for possible, future methods for combating the climate change, or how future generations might actually imagine using the space itself.
Like that, I mean, this is more related to the social justice than the climate change, because we think that the future generations, they have also right to think how the sea should be planned. So in those zones for future, it means that you can have different uses, but such uses which will not hamper future decisions. That's the key issue. But relating to what was said by Angela, in our report, we looked for the climate change. As you can see, it's one of the top priorities, because in fact, this approach of countries or projects were very scattered. I mean, there was one very good practice, this is climate refuge in the Swedish plan. Some other countries, they took some mitigation measures or adaptation measures, because mitigation is mainly windmills, but adaptation is in terms of the coastal defense. But we think that this is one of the topical issues for the future, that the countries should work together. This climate refuge, I think it's a very good idea, which could be spread out for also other countries, looking on not only on the current state, but what will be our sea in 10 years or something like that, or 20 years in the long run.
Exactly, good point. Okay, we come back to that, but I have now one question for Liene. Now, when listening all this regarding the BASEMAPS, I think it's very, very useful. Do you have any tool in place to kind of monitor and see if the planners are actually using it and how much is actually being used? Do you have any information, or is it kind of too early to think of that already?
I can let you know that HELCOM did carry an end user survey at the end of the last year, and there will be some data available. Unfortunately, I have no knowledge of the results yet, but we see that we can say definitely for sure that all the Baltic MSP plans are uploaded to Basemaps, and also in the I think in upcoming months, we will also know more about the other users beside the practitioners directly involved in MSP processes.
Okay, excellent, very good. And then in terms of the digital maps that are being prepared, I assume that is being kind of done in a simultaneous manner. So these are actually being then uploaded and updated in a timely manner, right? Because I saw in the videos, it's not only once a year, but it's kind of a more continuous process.
Yeah, that is what it is aimed for. What has to be noted maybe here that, of course, the Basemaps is depicting the MSPs, but it is not the MSPs itself. So always but what it does, it creates a platform for you to easily access and understand where to look for the latest data and information, and that's how it works. Because of course the data is harmonized for Basemaps. As you know, the HELCOM VASAB has agreed on guidelines for common structure for output data in the Baltic Sea region, and that is there might be some specifics in each and every MSP. So that's how it works together. That this serves as a platform. You can get an overview, and if you want to know it more in a detail, then you are guided via Basemap. So it's kind of a one-stop shop to easy access for needed data.
Very good. Thanks very much for the clarification. It's much clearer, at least for me now. Angela, we have one more minute, one more question for you, and I'm actually reading it. And I'm not sure if you can answer, but I'll anyway read it out loud. So why do the digital plans, why would they have to show the real uses? Of course, it's important for monitoring and evaluation and revision, but why for the plan itself? I'm throwing the question. I'm not sure. It's anonymous. I'm not sure who posted it. But yeah, you did explain a bit on that the digital plans would be showing the real uses, so those that are implemented. So any further take from you on that, or?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I do not mean that the digital plan itself, I mean, which is really sort of the MSP, should be adapted, but that in fact these digital plans may form a good basis for then transforming them into sort of also showing the actual developments. I think all of us who are dealing with stakeholders will still always have the issue that it's that stakeholders may assume, if we think about, again, going back to the plan from Denmark or also the plan from Germany, which is completely full. I mean, there is no white area anymore. And they show huge areas for offshore wind farm development. And therefore, many stakeholders who are not from this MSP family often assume, or it's difficult for them to understand, are these areas now full of offshore wind farms, or will they be, or what is actually planned? And just in terms of stakeholder communication, it's my little opinion. I would assume it's good to show also in real life terms what is actually then happening over the course of the next 10 years in these areas. And this is also not something which just came out of my own brain. I would like to sort of, remind people that, for instance, our colleagues from Portugal, they do have a system like that the plan is continuously in real lifetime adapted to show what is actually then licensed, built, etc.
Okay.
Angela is right, because images speak much more than words.
Very good, thanks. I'm just reading here, we had one addition from Denmark, FYI, in relation to the Danish plan, we have what we call service layers where you can see current users. So there an additional clarification on that. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. I think we can have a break now. Big thank you to our speakers. Excellent Q&A as well. I invite everyone to stay, to keep your eye on the screen during the break as well, because I think we'll be showing a video. So yeah, keep your eye on the screen somehow, and we will have a break for some 10 minutes. That means that we come back at 11:10. Yes, at 11:10. Okay, thank you.
Countries around the Baltic Sea are involved in the preparation of maritime spatial plans, and several have experience with the implementation of these plans. Project platform Capacity4MSP focuses on successful transnational knowledge transfer to support the implementation of maritime spatial plans in the Baltic Sea region. How it is done? We identify and describe lessons to be learned, challenges, obstacles, and possible solutions in existing practices of MSP implementation to support planners in their work. We develop a suitable future follow-up tools on the accomplishment of regional MSP commitments. We promote the use of the Baltic MSP data portal, BASEMAPS, by developing user guides and organizing help desk sessions. Stay tuned for project results. Capacity4MSP project platform builds on results of current and recently completed maritime spatial planning projects and ongoing MSP processes in the Baltic Sea region. We work to create practically oriented and interactive collaboration platform for knowledge exchange and intensified dialogue between MSP practitioners, policy and decision makers, and other stakeholders to strengthen their capacity. Project activities support the implementation of maritime spatial plans, follow up on the regional MSP commitments, and address the stakeholder involvement. To multiply gained knowledge and demonstrate synergies between various MSP activities, a report with policy messages aims toward well-functioning MSP in the region and successful alignment of new sea uses. Stay tuned for the project results. Stakeholder engagement in maritime spatial planning is an integral part of development and implementation of plans. MSP project platform has three main directions to address stakeholders' involvement. Project continues to organize the Baltic Sea region Maritime Spatial Planners Forum, a practical cooperation platform among maritime spatial planners to improve joint planning evidence and coherence to support the MSP cycle. To deepen dialogue between MSP stakeholder groups, cross-sectoral workshops are organized to bring forward gained knowledge from various MSP projects. Approaches and lessons learned from stakeholder engagement process are summed up on an integrated report with key messages and recommendations in the context of addressing MSP stakeholders within outside the Baltic Sea region. Stay tuned for project results.
Maritime Spatial Planning, or MSP for short, is defined as a process by which relevant member states' authorities analyse and organise human activities in marine areas to achieve ecological, economic and social objectives. Traditionally, the planning and management of marine spaces was done on a sector-by-sector basis. If developed at all, spatial plans were drawn up according to the needs of individual sectors. Yet a lack of integration and mutual understanding between different sectors threatened to stall further development due to increased conflicts and litigations, especially in overcrowded areas. A shift towards a more integrated approach to management came into being once the EU MSP directive was adopted in 2014. As a multi-sector approach, MSP seeks to integrate the needs of different sectors, finding synergies rather than keeping them separate. Space is allocated in anticipation of future development, giving an indication of suitable sites and corresponding uses. This has resulted in plans with multiple layers which reflect designations for different sectors. These plans are normally accompanied by a report showing the conditions under which such activities can be placed. Nowadays, this is often supported by digital tools. For example, Denmark and Finland have developed interactive online tools with detailed explanations of MSP designations. The good news is, all Baltic states have now adopted MSPs. However, not all MSPs look the same, which is understandable given that each country has different geographic, socio-economic and environmental priorities. But on the whole, the current usage designations between the borders of Baltic states are generally coherent. This coherence has been a direct benefit of progress achieved through successive transnational projects, which have also improved understanding within the Baltic MSP community. Previously driven by research, maritime spatial planning authorities now take an increasingly proactive role while still benefiting from the close interaction with researchers, exemplified by the HELCOM VASAB MSP working group, an informal regular meeting of MSP practitioners around the Baltic Sea, as well as the so-called Planners Forum and regular international MSP conferences under the MSP Forum.